There's a moment in the movie that I'm particularly fond of. You know, Carol lands and she's kind of off balance.
Yeah.
And that is so beautifully her.
Hey guys, this is Charles Pliamore from IO9, and we are here to have a very special conversation about all things Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel with
Kelly Sue DeConnick.
Mary Livanos.
But I think it's really interesting that Carol's become like a hot topic of conversation, not just for Marvel movie nerds or comic book geeks, for just like, regular people. And so with that in mind, what's it been like to really sort of see the Carol discourse pop up in such a big and drastic way so quickly?
I think there were a lot of expectations. Like there was a lot of nerves around how it was going to go, and I wasn't involved in Endgame at all, so I had those nerves as well. I was sort of I had a fear that I was like, please don't let her be a Deus Ex Machina. Please don't let her be Deus Ex Machina. And I thought she was actually used in a way that was really smart.
What elements of Carol's life in its entirety were really important for you to emphasize in your respective stories where you were bringing her to a new audience for the first time?
For us making Captain Marvel the movie, it was really taking all the best parts of Carol from the comics. Carol's A-type personality, the fact that she's a fighter pilot, making sure that we were distilling that correctly and representing Carol correctly was a huge task.
Carol has such an expansive comics history. There's so much that you can pull from.
Starting with In Pursuit of Flight, I wanted to revisit a lot of moments from classic Carol Danvers history. I wanted to see if we could revisit important touchstones in a way that gave her more agency. What I mean by that is oftentimes in storytelling with women, they are acted upon. I wanted to give Carol these experiences in a way where they were her choice, right? So for instance, when Carol has her memory wiped out in previous runs, it's a thing that happens to her, right? So when I messed with Carol's memory in Enemy Within, I did it in a way where it was her choice. She was making a heroic choice, a heroic sacrifice, right? She knew she would lose her sense of herself and her identity, but by making this choice to use this power, she was going to save a bunch of people. It was more active.
It's hard because she's so powerful. How do you keep that character realistic, and how do you make sure, when she swoops in, that the rest of the story still feels grounded? And so I think when, in the finale, Thanos is at his most powerful, it's a feat of storytelling to have Carol sweep in when she does.
Usually what you can balance that with is her poor decision making, which is actually really excellent. Carol sort of doesn't think things through and is very impulsive. That's a beautiful and very human way of tempering that power in your story. But then in Endgame, that was something that they had to balance. And again, I wasn't involved in that, so I can't speak to how it was handled. But as a viewer, I was like, oh, okay, that's really smart, because you can't use the usual ways that we temper her power, because it's such a large cast, and you can't assume people have seen her movie. You can't assume, so you have moments to introduce her. And they did a great job of establishing her hubris, right, with that line where she's like,
because before you didn't have me.
and I was like, that's gonna work for you, Carol, always does,
But it's true, right? She's a character with a ton of power, so that makes sense. There's the Earth-centric Marvel universe, but then there's a whole other...
Right. There's a universe out there.
There's an entire universe out there, so she's a character because of her powers that has a ton of responsibility, so...
With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Her father is a construction foreman, and he has 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and he refuses to pay for college for Carol because she's gonna get married anyway, was the thinking. And so Carol initially enlists as a way of getting college paid for. For me, it was always Carol trying to prove to her now dead father, that she's just as good as the boys and just as worthy as the boys, and that that's an unfillable hole You know, you can't get approval from someone who's dead.
Right.
You know,
Right.
in a normal human being's life, we hope that you get to the point where you understand that that kind of fulfillment can only come from within, but luckily we don't allow our superheroes to do that. So she's become an adrenaline junkie because of this kind of always trying to push herself further.
What's it been like to sort of see the fandom as a whole really have to reckon with the fact that like Carol is here now and she's not going anywhere? This is my my insidious way of being like, what do you think about like the negative reaction to her?
Carol coming to the forefront of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is part of the reality that Marvel Universe for the films has to grow and evolve. If men or other folks have an issue with Carol, it might be their own baggage that they bring to the table.
As a character who lived in my head for so long, she feels like a friend.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, look what you did, girl. Well, I mean, people who are drawn to this person who always wants to do better, like, those are people who always want to do better. If you are threatened by that, if you feel like that takes something away from you, or that's like not realistic enough for you in a world where Thanos, I don't know what to say to that. I mean, they waged this huge boycott. Can you imagine how many billions the movie would have made if...
The fact is that so many people have seen this movie, and so many people are inspired by this movie. I mean, growing up, I just grasped for any like cool female lead movie that I could, because I felt like a little Carol. I loved adrenaline. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to aspire to be something more. So to have Carol do that for young girls now is just the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah.